Okay, hi, good afternoon, class. So this is our first session on trying out this new platform, which is virtual, okay, instead of our usual face-to-face discussions. But before anything else, I hope that everyone is doing good. I hope that everyone is doing well, considering this situation that we are in, and I hope that I made it clear to everyone that the the main priority right now is still your health, your wellness, and your immediate household. Okay. So last night I was able to upload this discussion, okay, this presentation on the political dynasties in the Philippines and how this culture, this culture of political dynasties in the Philippines have become persistent patterns or perennial problems. And why are we discussing this in light of the concept of the culture and tradition um, of our morals, of our ethics? Primarily because, as we have discussed in our previous discussions or in our previous lessons, it is always already embedded in our culture, right? Um, Morals, our moral ascendancy, our moral standards are always already prescribed or are always already informed by socio-economic milieu. Okay, our material condition. It is always already dictated and subscribed to that kind of ideology. But before everything else, I want you to welcome three of your new classmates. You have Squirtle, you have Bulbasaur, and Charmander sitting in for our discussion today. All right. Since I did not get initial questions regarding the slideshow presentation that I have uploaded last night, so let's just do a quick rundown of the concepts that I have presented. When I post this, maybe tonight, please comment on specific questions. Please raise specific questions and clarifications, or if you have points to discuss, please comment on the thread where I'm going to post it so that we can have a dialogue and a conversation there. Okay, political dynasties. This has been uh, a huge um, issue when we are talking about politics in the Philippines, right? But what are political dynasties? In the second slide, political dynasties are referred to as traditional political families, right? Or the practices by these political families of monopolizing political power, wherein the public office becomes a personal property of these people who are in position. A very important concept there is monopoly, right? There is a certain focusing or a certain focusing or a certain concentration of power to only the elite few. And this has become rampant in any political system, be it in the barangay level, in the municipal level, in the regional level, and even in the national level. If you take a look at certain statistics, for instance, 100, for instance, 169 out of 200 elected House of Representatives were members of the pre-1972 traditional families. That is 84.5% of the total seats in Congress. And this has been a continuing trend, a continuing general trend in Philippine politics, whereby 70% of Philippine Congress is dynastic. So if we take a look at that, it is something that is already embedded in our political culture, in our political mindset. And if we try to uh, think otherwise, there is that tendency to question even ourselves, like, why am I even questioning this? It's already part of tradition, it's already part of culture, and we see ourselves as the inferior or the minority, that a lot of people would just claim, well, it's part of the tradition, it's part of the culture. Why are you trying to challenge it? Or do we even now we have already questioned ourselves? Do we have the power to actually question it? This is not a political science subject. That is why our main concern here is, and this is what you should be thinking about after, is given our discussions um, on morality, standards of morality, moral ascendancy, our concept of our moral responsibilities. How is our idea and our conception of politics or political dynasties here in the Philippines affect the way we we tackle or the way we view politics in the Philippines, considering that the culture is dynastic, okay, in nature. And further on, we will see if is it asymptomatic of the kind of corruption, the level, not kind, the level of corruption and the level of poverty that a lot of our a lot of Filipinos are suffering right now. And again, we go back to what we are currently experiencing right now, this pandemic. A lot of us feel a certain level of privilege because we can just stay home and enjoy Netflix and be comfortable and just write down our what is required of us, and we would still get, paid, or you would still pass these subjects. But not a lot of us, or a majority of the Filipinos, do not have that kind of what do you call this, privilege. Okay, so we should be um, responsible enough to look into the privilege that we currently enjoy, and we have to be responsible with this kind of how would you call this, if ever we plan to give our comments. We have to be very mindful of the things that we are actually talking about. Okay. um, why are political dynasties in the Philippines considered resilient? Why are we still in this kind of culture? There are many factors, but in this lecture we concentrated on three. Number one, the formidable political and socio-economic foundations which established political dynasties, which means that this did not just happen overnight. This did not just happen a few years ago or a few decades ago. This has been going on for a long time, and it has survived, and it has multiplied, or it has already grounded itself in such a way that it has been part of the foundations of our political system. Next, the failure to effectively implement constitutional provisions to address its adverse effects. We have been talking about this. When we are talking about the law, there are so many laws already in place. But what is problematic and challenging right now is how do we actually execute and apply uh, these laws? And most of the time, those who are already in power, those who have political positions, are the ones who can actually navigate through these laws and craft them in such a way that it will be beneficial for them, right? And lastly, the weakness of potential countervailing forces against political dynasties. Remember that whenever we are trying to counter something that is rampant, that is already considered a culture or a tradition, it is very challenging because we think, or a lot of people would think, that why are you trying to counter something that has already been established? And these are very dangerous phrases. When you say that something is already established, that something is already part of a tradition, that something is already embedded in culture, it is not as easy as, okay, I'm going to accept that. The reason why we are in this class is to sharpen our faculty of philosophizing and trying to think about ways on how we can actually argue for the betterment of our reasons. There should be a reason behind it, and it does not end with the fact that it's tradition. It does not end with the fact that it's part of our culture. There is a deeper reason why it has been embedded, and these are the things that we should challenge. These are the things that we should question. Looking at it historically, political dynasties and the rise of the Philippine oligarchy, three important junctures actually happened. Number one, 1898 to 1946, the perpetuation of the oligarchy during the American colonial regime. The next one is 1946, the perpetuation of political dynasties after we gained independence. And lastly, 1972 to 1986, which still haunts us right now, is the political dynasties that were established or that were put into place because of the martial law, because of the Marcoses. Now, if we try to situate the political dynasties in the Philippine patrimonial politics, let's try to read this next slide. These developments in the central bureaucracy and local patron-client relations, as well as in the expansion of governmental economic responsibilities, highlight the seeming strengthening of patrimonial features within the post-colonial Philippine state. Because these patterns became more pronounced in recent times as access to the state began to be more important for securing patronage and rents, the term neo-patrimonial or the new patrimonial helps to capture the historical sequence. So what is, if we filter out, it's a whole it's a mouthful, right? It's a mouthful. The paragraph is charged with so many concepts, but if we try to weed out unnecessary concepts here, what we are left with is the concept of patronage, right? For instance, that is the reason why an important reading, excuse me, an important reading, an important reading prior to this discussion is the article written by Patricia Licuanan that talks about the culture of the Filipinos and how these cultures are considered some of our strengths and some of our weaknesses. And one of the glaring reality there is the patronage system. And maybe tangential here in this discussion is the concept of utang na loob, right? And we can see this. We can see this, for instance, during the time of the elections. Mangungutang ka sa isang mayaman na businessman, for instance. And you're going to assure them that once they win, or once you win, once you secure a political position, that you will not forget them, that you will not forget the benefits or the help that they gave you. So, for instance, there is no longer the concept of choosing any third party and giving them projects because these specific businesses or businessmen and businesswomen or business people would be the ones who would benefit from these projects of yours, right? Next slide, we are talking about the different variations or variants of political dynasties. We know that political families in the Philippines have perpetuated themselves through so many means. Let's not even go far. For instance, in Mandaluyong, it has always been, the Abalos. And they would really craft neatly in the sense that, okay, from the father to the mother to the brother and then to the son to the daughter, to a point that we have been uh, we don't even realize it, but we have been under the same rule for already two, three, even four generations already. And if we take a look at what is happening right now, who is the most visible of these mayors, for instance, in NCR, uh, wherein the visibility is effective, it's optimal, it's pro people. I have to say that it's Mayor Vico Soto. And while some people would say that he is still part of, in a sense, he is still part of a political dynasty, they were able to topple one political family. But this is where our moral dilemma comes in. Um, who would we support when those who are vying for each position are actually coming from two political families or two political dynasties? That if you are an independent an independent someone who do not have like such influence, right? You won't have such connections or network with the rich people or rich people, and you won't have that advantage. And what would happen is that you would there would be high probability that you would lose, right? Um, for the political dynasties, or the we call it family enterprise here in the Philippines, they have perpetuated or they have survived primarily because of three needs. Number one, rent seeking. Number two is political violence, and the last one is electoral politics and networks. Let's try to take a look at them one by one. For rent seeking, the example given here was Eugenio Lopez. Eugenio Lopez, who used his commercial and legal skills to become the Republic's leading rent-seeking entrepreneur. Simultaneously, his younger brother Fernando maintained the family's political base in the home province of Iloilo and used it to bolster his climb to national elective office. They have power. We know when we are talking about the power relations, right? They are already in the center and they have control. They have proper networks. They have um, uh, economic advantage. They have the economic leverage. And they are using all of these in order to bolster and to boost their leverage some more. Right? And it is a vicious cycle. It is something that would eventually augment and improve their leverage as time goes by. Next one is political violence. According to John Seidel, 1999, he referred to such a situation as bossism, wherein in the Philippines, bosses have included small town mayors, provincial governors, congressmen, and even presidents. And of course, we have already, there have been many discussions, for instance, between the difference between a leader or a boss. And we have to take note of its root word, bossy, right? You are just there to instruct and to instruct and to instruct, but not necessarily lead or not necessarily influence or not necessarily to motivate your constituents. Bossism, as a term, means the interlocking multilateral directorate of bosses who use their control over the state apparatus to exploit the archipelago's human and natural resources. They are in position. They are in the position of power. And they do not think twice in to make use of its full power, of its full the opportunities that are presented in order to aggregately collect power. Because when you aggregately collect power, you also maintain a certain economic and financial leverage. And of course, electoral politics and networks. A third power base of political dynasties in the Philippines is through electoral politics and networks. For instance, political dynasties which have built their power not through bureaucratic, military, or even economic position, but by electoral means. Um, for instance, when you start small and you try to control certain areas for in a province, for instance, and you slowly but surely collect this number of people who actually believe you. Of course, it is possible that you really have proven yourself, but we have to understand that networks also play a huge part in this. And we go back again to that core problematic of, okay, what if, so what if you use these networks that you have? It's not your fault that you have these networks. But again, we go back to the culture of patronage. Yung utang na loob. Sige, may utang na loob ako sa'yo, so right, and we know how it works. It works in small ways. It works in bigger ways. It works microeconomically, but it also works macroeconomically. So what are the effects of these political dynasties? And we know that the direct effect of these political dynasties. For instance, the perpetuation of poverty and underdevelopment. We no longer need to discuss it um, uh, one by one, because we know that a lot of people are suffering um, because of poverty here in the Philippines. Underdevelopment, uh, we know that we can further develop, right? But these are certain hindrances that, okay, what is that? Okay. We know that it is hindered primarily because of political dynasties. Okay. Padaanin muna natin siya. Tough times. Okay, next is the propagation of political and socio-economic inequality. Sinasabi natin na sa panahon ngayon, dahil sa politika, ang mga mayayaman nagiging mas mayaman, ang mga mahihirap mas nagiging mahirap. And I'm sure that you have seen videos in your social media of what is currently happening right now. May lockdown, may quarantine. We are privileged enough to be in the comfort of our homes with enough food, and our only problem is mahina ang internet, or what show in Netflix will I watch next. But outside, it's a different story altogether. There are a lot of citizens, there are a lot of people who whose main problem is, if I don't go to work, I will not have anything to feed my family with. Napakadiling sabihin na, but hindi na lang kasi manatili sa mga bahay ang mga tao. It's so easy to say that. But how can you stay put in your house if you know that if you don't go out, if you do not work, your family is not going to eat anything? How will you be able to survive? So that is an example of a moral dilemma. And in the confines of your house, you can start problematizing on that. Oo nga no. Paano ko paano ko inilulugar ang sarili ko sa mga usaping ganyan? Oo, ipinag-utos ng gobyerno na manahimik sa mga bahay. Pero paano ang mga tao na walang karapatang manahimik sa bahay dahil wala silang panganabuhay? Nasaan ang suporta ng gobyerno? Yun ang una nating titingnan. And if we look at the statistics, for instance, uh, we know that it's gonna get worse before it's gonna get better. I think the only way to process our thoughts right now, I know that these are trying times. These are very difficult times. But I think that one way to look into this current issue is we incorporate it in our lessons, right? The question of, if this continues on, I may be safe, I may survive, but how about the others? We are not tackling these issues in our lessons just so they will remain theoretical, right? So that it would remain in our thoughts. But it should also inform the way we think. It should inform the way we view these socio-economic issues that we are currently facing. And I think now is the best time. Now is the best time to practice and to exercise your moral ascendancy, your moral responsibility. How can I help um, my immediate community? How will I help? How will I help for the common good? Um, a lot of people think that yes, it's easy. Stay home. What did you do during the pandemic? I stayed home. Yes, of course. That in itself is already good. But we have to think about accountability after the dust has settled, after this um, pandemic ends. Hopefully, it will end. I am very positive of that. It will end. After it ends, people should be held accountable because we shouldn't have been in this situation in the first place, and they have to be answerable. Okay, so I will be waiting for your questions. I will be waiting for specific concepts that you want to still tackle, that you want to talk about. If you have ideas, please comment on the posting that I'm going to make. So it's either a question, a follow up, if you want to create a dialogue, if you want to create a conversation, if you have additional thoughts that you can add or augment in our discussion, please feel free to add in our discussion. Okay? So, yeah, I hope that all of you would continue to persist. I know these are very challenging times, but you know, we have to pursue and persist. Okay? So, yeah, I'll see you on our next online session. Bye.